Hi! Oh gosh, that sounds so awkward. Hey guys! Nope, no. Hello everyone, hope this video finds you well. You know, I'm just gonna put some time lapses in the background and call it a day. I know I have said this many times, but thank you all for your patience. This video wasn't inherently supposed to take this long to make, but alas, this is around the time of the year when things will get super busy at work. Hopefully the worst is behind us and I can actually draw the anime opening instead of talking about drawing the anime opening. But before big project number 2, I wanted to revisit big project number 1. This idea first started when I had a 2-hour-long conversation with my friend, Zcat, who you may have seen in this frame in the beginning of Red Rage. He's also recently posted a video on his YouTube channel of him building the tarot cards in Minecraft of all the live series winners, so please check him out. We were discussing plans for scenes I wanted to draw in the anime opening for Wildlife. Crazy, isn't it guys? I actually made some progress here, and I was telling him how I'd approach the animation for this new project differently. Then our conversation pivoted to how it would be different, so I thought maybe it would be nice to talk about the process of Red Rage as a basis for myself, and also to share with anybody who's curious about it and still watching this video. Now, there's still a whole bunch I don't know about animation. I'm treating this video as a journal entry, and something I can look back on, and clown myself for all the silly mistakes I made. There's a table of contents for all the topics in this video. It is organized in the order that I approached this project. Feel free to skip around to the segment that you're interested in. I'll try to keep some structure, but my brain jumps around, and so should you. If you want to skip all the technical stuff like what apps I was using and processes like that, I recommend skipping to the segment called Intro Scenes for detailed discussion about Red Rage itself. Warning, this may contain spoilers of the Wildlife series. Proceed at your own risk. Now, let's begin. Wildlife. If you haven't seen this new season to the live series yet, please go watch it. All 18 of the participants have put out some amazing videos of all their shenanigans in this SMP. And I'm not saying I have a favorite, I'm also saying go check out Smosh Beans episodes. No particular reason, none at all. I'd done simple animatics for each episode from Joel's POV, just filter for Rage, and you'll find all of them. But Red Rage was gonna be different. There were 3 applications that I used for this project. Procreate is the biggest one. It's a digital art app, but it has this handy animation assist feature that lets me create frames within a drawing. I would sketch all the frames, line art all the frames, color all the frames, all within Procreate, and then export it to Procreate Dreams, which I had downloaded in the same tablet, so I could honestly just drag and drop, and that saved some time. Procreate Dreams is like this spin-off of Procreate that specializes in animation. It's great, but not as great as regular Procreate when it comes to actually drawing stuff. The good thing about Dreams though is that it has the tweening feature, which moves an object from one frame to another very smoothly. A lot of the scenes in Red Rage use tweening to add a bit of cinematic effect to the stiller frames. Finally, I exported the whole Procreate Dreams file into an app on my phone called InShot. Fun fact, I use this app to edit all the Wildlife and Impossible Minecraft animatics. Yes, I do it all on my phone, and I'll probably keep doing it since it hasn't failed me yet. After doing some minor trims to the video and making sure the music aligned properly, I exported the file from InShot to YouTube Studio. I recently finished season 2 of Arcane, and if you haven't watched that series yet, I highly recommend it even if you're not a League of Legends fan. I know and still know absolutely nothing about that game. The soundtrack itself is a banger, and I really wanted to create something with one of the songs. I was originally going to use Remember Me intro version, and then I considered What Have They Done to Us, which by the way has an acoustic-ish version that I've been listening to on repeat lately, but I felt like both of those were too short, so after giving the soundtrack a few more listens, I finally settled on Wasteland. My past self clearly did not know how much extra work went into 40 extra seconds. But alas, once music was chosen, I started storyboarding in my head. I feel like in the industry, animators always start with a full storyboard sketch of the whole project, which is something I want to try doing for the anime opening. But for Red Rage, even though I had generally imagined how the whole video would go, I literally ended up sketching and finalizing scene by scene. I'd make the storyboard for maybe a few seconds of the music and then go in with line art and color and backgrounds and essentially send updates to Zcat for every scene I'd finished. Overall, I followed a basic plot pyramid to give this chaotic season a dramatic story. The next few sections will look at the scenes for each of these plot points in detail and include animation tips and tricks that I learned along the way. Having this general idea in my head as I was drawing helped provide a lot of direction and was also very motivating. It definitely saved me a lot of time by avoiding drawing any scenes that I wouldn't use. With all that technical stuff out of the way, let's jump into the animation itself. This first scene with the rose might not look like much, but this is where I decided on my color palette for the whole animation, which I did see some comments about. By the way, Procreate has these amazing built-in brushes that make drawing backgrounds like this grass so much easier. The idea of Joel crushing a red flower foreshadows him eventually winning against the other red names, and it was after drawing this that I decided to draw Joel's scenes in yellow and Redname scenes in shades of red. This shot of Gem is a good example of how I pretty much approach drawing everything in this project. In Procreate, I draw the backgrounds on their own frame with however many layers I needed within that frame. Then I draw any characters or movement that happened on separate frames, color those in, and export the whole segment into Procreate Dreams. In Dreams, I could basically move the background onto its own track, then extend the length of that background to cover the whole segment of that scene. I can easily move the background to be in front or behind the character, and also put effects on it, like blurs or darkening and moody things like that. The transition from the sun to the detonation button was actually my friend Zcat's idea. Grian is associated with the sun, so it's fitting that the next thing we see is him looking ominous with TNT. Thank you again Zcat for these brilliant ideas, and don't forget to check out the tarot card build he did for Grian in his video. Another pretty common and incredibly useful animation technique that I used a lot throughout this project is animating frames within tweened objects. This stick of TNT changes positions as it falls in 3 drawings. I can group these frames together in Dreams and use the tweening function for a smooth falling motion. Altogether, it creates a much more dynamic scene with relatively little effort. Because I knew that Grian and Joel would eventually face off as the final 2, I wanted to add some dramatized context to make their teammate to enemies arc make sense. In the actual SMP, Joel and Gem were like, LOL, Grian bamboozlers, and I think Gem was actually more mad at Grian than Joel was. But for this project, I drew the explosion on Mount Bam as a scene that Joel wouldn't be aware of until later in the story. So yeah, this definitely isn't lore accurate, but we like drama and we like angst, so alas. Once again, Dreams is great at doing these blur effects to dramatize a shot like this. Etho was quite the hot potato in this series, and I wanted to depict all the quote-unquote alliances he had through the view of his crossbow. The family, the tough guys, the G's. Yeah, I think he was ready to shoot anybody and we wouldn't be surprised. The method I used to animate this part was to draw the targeting system on its own layer. Each character had their own segment, and they move into view via a motion blur effect in the first frame. I put a Gaussian blur on them to simulate the crossbow focusing. By the way, I thought Scott's red skin was so cool and creepy, I just had to give it some attention, so I sprinkled the creaking eyes throughout the video, and I wanted to show how vigilant they were in hunting for Joel, because A, Scott is already a very perceptive Minecraft player, and B, he really wanted Joel dead. Joel of course avoided direct confrontation with Scott for most of the series, because as Lizzie advised, it never ends well. So remembering this advice, Joel backs away from Scott only to be met with his dead, zombified wife. Some of you guys commented about this, and I'm really glad people like these designs because the reference searches for the zombies on Google Images was not a pretty process. After Joel sees Lizzie, I thought it would be fitting to give Joel flashbacks to the better days, plus it came naturally with the mood of the song Wasteland at this point, and I think it was a good break from everything that had happened so far. We've got Lizzie still alive, Jimmy when he was flirting with Joel numerous times, Scar and his reassurances that his roller coaster is totally safe, Etho giving Joel the wrong answer to Trivia Bot, Grian inviting Joel and Gem to be his new spanners, and of course, Gem on her camel. I gave Gem more screen time because she was Joel's duo this season, and also because it was a good transition to the present, where she kinda snaps Joel out of his flashback by yelling his name. I tried my best to put some lip movement here. She pushes him aside and gets in Scott's way, which I think did kinda happen in the actual SMP where she was yelling at her fellow Rednames to not kill her teammate. That's our loyal Gem to the end. I was very excited and very nervous about drawing this first fight scene. This was the first ever motion-heavy combat sequence animation that I'd ever drawn before. Prior to this, I had zero experience with creating fight choreography and didn't know any techniques to make animating this any easier. I made plenty of mistakes and had to redraw plenty of frames, but it was through the trial and error that I learned and compiled the tips and tricks I would later use for the second fight scene. The first super helpful resource I used for these fight sequences was Stickman fight animations on YouTube. They are usually flat fight sequences with simple stick figure characters, but man, the choreography is insane. I'm sure there's a stick fight animation for every type of weapon and superpower that you could watch for some inspiration. The stick figures were a very important foundation for the choreography and a great base for me to start with. For details and change in depth of the fights, my brother actually recommended the anime Sword Art Online. For those who aren't familiar with this anime, the title kind of explains why I watched so many clips of it. There are some pretty great sword fights that I referenced for effects and movement and fancy stuff. Oh, and the teleportation was inspired by the Marvel character Nightcrawler's teleportation ability and any animated clips of Nightcrawler's fighting style. It wasn't exactly the same since Joel's ability lets him switch places with another character, but I had fun thinking about how he'd taken advantage of it and embedded it into the fight choreography. Joel played defense for most of this fight, but I wanted to give him credit for killing zombie Martin. And of course, it isn't a life series without a Martin-Ren duo, so I added Martren's reaction next, which worked out because Martren was one of the main Reds in the final episode who hunted Joel until the end. Joel teleports away with confidence. Honestly, in the SMP, he was having so much fun teleporting around, bro was unstoppable. But you just can't escape death in the life series, and that's Scott. Right when Joel thinks he's safe, Scott catches up to him. In my mind, Scott was like that death character in that Puss in Boots movie. Even after Grian saves Joel by switching their positions via teleport, Scott's creaking eyes will always find him. By the way, and some of you guys noticed this in the comments already, I drew the 3 bamboozler parrots here with different crest feather numbers to represent their placements. Scar died first, so he's 3rd within the bamboozlers, and according to the death message order, Lizzie died next and Jimmy died last. In hindsight, maybe I should have reversed it and been like, Scar died first, so he gets 1 feather. I low-key spent so much time drawing these parrots, and they were originally only going to appear for like 1 second, so I ended up extending it to 3 seconds to make it worth it. I mentioned before about how I deviated a bit from the original events in the SMP by having it so Joel wasn't yet aware of Grian blowing up the bamboozlers. And that's because as I was thinking ahead, I figured Grian teleporting Joel up Mount Bam would be a convenient way to set up the dramatized scene of Joel discovering the aftermath of the explosion. Like, imagine being saved by one of your last allies only to turn around and find out bro blew up your wife and your occasional boyfriend. Although Lizzie did tell Jimmy to bam her in the bunker. If Wildlife ever became a book, this would probably be one of the many love triangles. With the deaths of the bamboozlers, I figured Joel would see Grian as this red devil of chaos that we all know he can be, and it creates context for why Joel would kill him in the end. He screams Grian's name in anger, but the betrayals don't end here, as right after that, there's Etho blatantly attacking Joel. Again, hot potato this one. Up until this point, I feel like Joel still had faith in his fellow boatmate. Jem was like, nah, Etho's sus, but Joel wanted to believe, so I feel like he'd be horrified by his betrayal at first. In the actual SMP, Etho backs off like, whoops, sorry, totally forgot teams. I decided to change that up a bit to add to Joel's character development. He'd already gone through Grian's betrayal, so with Etho, he kinda composes himself after the initial shock and socks him in the face. And just in time, because Death himself is back for some blood. I had a lot of fun drawing weapon transitions like this shield to sword animation. A trick I used to help draw this is to color in the objects for 1 frame each and put a glow effect on them. I added in some sweeping lines of the sword motion to make the weapon change smoother and glowing lines for the flash of the impact. Procreate has a preset special glow brush to create those lines. I absolutely love that brush and I use it all the time. This sequence was by far my favorite part to animate. I had figured out how to approach fight scenes after experimenting with the first one, so I felt much more confident going into this one. I didn't need to use any references, I had come up with a clear vision of the choreography in my head, and the stick figure motions just all made sense. Hallelujah! Once the stick figures were done, drawing the character details was just rinse and repeat. To help me keep consistent sizing throughout the fight, I made a copy of their heads so I could draw their bodies proportionally. I added sweeping motions between swings and occasionally impact sparks. Even though this sequence had so much movement, it was actually significantly easier than the first one. I still have a lot to learn about drawing fight scenes, but I now know much more than when I started. There's no such thing as perfect, but practice definitely gets you closer. With that sequence finished, I added a little pause in their fight as a break from all the action so far, and a break for my wrist. Since I knew that Scott would kill Joel and Etho would accidentally kill Scott right after, I had to figure out a way for the staging to make sense. I drew Etho standing on Scott's side because at this point it seemed like he was teaming more with the G's. Scott, as a red aggressor, attacks first, so Joel is forced to meet him. This is exactly what Lizzie warned Joel against doing, and it ends badly. Joel is critically wounded and sees Etho raising his crossbow behind them. But since Scott has creaking eyes on his back, he would have seen Etho pointing his crossbow at them. Scott's creaking eyes had been one of his main features throughout this animation. I wanted it to symbolize the hunt, how terrifying Scott can be, and how he kind of has the upper hand as a red name. If Joel wants to take Scott down, he has to find Scott's blind spot, or in this case, make one. So Joel grabs Scott, turns them around so he's blocking Scott's view of his incoming death, and the arrow goes straight through Joel's dissipating body and kills Scott instead. Scott's death marked the beginning of the flood of red deaths, which I included as silhouettes with blood splatters for a dark and tragic mood. I added some more detailed scenes for Tango's death because he would become Joel's first kill as a red name. Though granted he pretty much creepered himself down to 1 heart, the tough guy is basically self-destructed. Etho blew himself up with his own trap, and Tango wind-charged P-dubs off the tower. Keep your friends close, but your enemies closer, as they say. This is applicable to Pearl's death too, where her Ender Pearl unfortunately hit Bamboo and the fall damage was pretty rough. Quick kill for Grian there. Now I know in the SMP, Grian and Joel were clearly still teammates at this point, but because I changed that dynamic earlier, I decided not to depict Joel as on any side other than his own. Grian, Cleo, Ren, no one was safe as we see the new red Joel standing over the battlefield, eerily outlined by lightning flashes from killing Tango. This is the moment that I've been waiting for pretty much this whole season, and though it was for a short period, I loved drawing every bit of red Joel out for blood. The tables had turned, and now Joel was the hunter, and he did not disappoint. It was one kill after the other. He shot a poison arrow at Cleo and killed her, then turned around and hit Ren off the side of a cliff. He found Grian hiding on a tree. I drew this shot of Joel through the lens of Grian's bow as a parallel to Scott in the lens of Etho's crossbow in the beginning. In a dramatic sense, Joel had become the new Scott, the new subject of terror in the story. He disappears from Grian's view, and Ender pulls behind him for a surprise attack. This is why I added the prior conflict between Grian and Joel, so that this scene would make sense as Joel's revenge. He kills Grian and is crowned the new Life series winner. Let's flip and go. With so much having happened so quickly in the last few moments of the episode, I decided to end the animation with a quiet segment of Joel looking over the world. Or I guess, the wasteland that this new season of the Life series took place in. Thank you again to Zcat for pointing out that I basically forgot about Joel's car and the whole animation, so I put a little drawing here and blurred it, because I suck at drawing vehicles. Eventually, Joel whips out the Ender Pearl that he uses to take his last life and effectively end the season. What a wild, wild ride. The concept this time around was definitely on the more whimsical side, but I think that gave me more room to experiment with all the different ways I could dramatize it. Red Rage was something entirely different from the other animatics in the Rage series starring Joel. I had no idea when I decided to follow Joel's POV from the start that he would go on to win the series, and I'm so proud of him for finally obtaining the crown he deserves. I sprinkled in some of the animating tips and tricks I used for this project, but please pop any questions you have in the comment section below. I do try to respond to all comments, and will do my best to give an answer for any specific scenes you want to know more about. There's a lot to learn, and I appreciate all of you being here to learn and grow with me. Once again, special thanks to Zcat for his help during this project, and be sure to check out his video of building the tarot cards of all the Life series winners, and his tips and tricks on the process. I couldn't have done this without you all. Remember, you guys made Red Rage possible, and for that experience, I'll always be grateful. Thanks, and see you next time.